All right, ready to dive into another week of Running Rebooted.
Let's do it. Week 5. This is where things start to get interesting.
Yeah, this week we're really getting into the nitty-gritty of marathon training. But you know what I love about this blog is even if you're like me and a marathon sounds a bit intense.
A tad ambitious, perhaps.
Exactly. This blog makes it feel doable, like breaks it down into manageable steps week by week.
Totally. There's that whole thing, the journey of 1,000 miles, starts with a single step, or in this case, a single stride.
And this week starts on a high note. Our runner crushed their half-marathon personal best.
That's huge. Talk about a confidence boost, right? Especially as the training volume increases.
Oh, for sure. But speaking of increasing mileage, they did mention a little knee pain this week.
Ah, yes. The inevitable aches and pains of pushing your limits.
Exactly. So how do you know when to push through and when to back off?
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question. And honestly, it applies to so many things in life, not just running, finding that balance between pushing yourself and listening to your body.
Couldn't agree more.
And this week really highlights the importance of recovery. I mean, did you see how much emphasis they put on rest and active recovery?
Oh, yeah. They even mentioned feeling awesome after a yoga session, and there was that whole thing with the badminton game.
Right, where they felt that twinge in their knee.
Yes. And it makes you think, even everyday activities can be a factor when you're training at this level.
It's all connected. And it's so easy to get caught up in the moment, ignore those little warning signs.
And that's when those little twinges can turn into something more serious, and nobody wants that. Speaking of which, they made a pretty tough decision this week. They decided to take a break from badminton.
Wow, yeah.
Which, might not seem like a huge deal to some people.
Right.
But you can tell from the blog it was something they really enjoyed.
Yeah, definitely. And it really highlights the sacrifices that come with chasing a big goal.
It's like, what are you willing to give up, at least temporarily, to achieve something you really want, right?
Exactly. It's all about trade-offs. You can't have it all.
And speaking of trade-offs, they did a pretty intense long run this week, 19.5 kilometers.
Getting those miles in.
Yeah. They even mentioned practicing their gel strategy, which, I gotta be honest, sounds a little overwhelming to me.
That's real marathon training for you. It's not just about running at that point. You got to think about fueling, pacing, the mental game.
So many things to keep track of. Makes you appreciate that there's a whole science to it,
Oh, absolutely.
Well, luckily, our runner has Coach Jen in their corner. She seemed pretty pumped about that long run and that consistent speed they managed during that fartlek session.
It's so important to have that kind of support system.
It really is. And Coach Jen, she doesn't just give a high five and call it a day either. She asks this really simple but profound question. How are you feeling?
Ooh, I like where you're going with this.
Right.
It seems so obvious, but you rarely stop and actually think about it,
It's like, when was the last time you really checked in with yourself? And not just physically, I mean the whole shebang.
Totally. And having someone else ask, especially someone you trust, it just creates this space to be real,
Yeah. And then you can actually process those feelings and figure out what you need to do next.
Exactly. Adjust your training, reach out for support, whatever. Or sometimes just acknowledging how far you've come is enough.
So we've got this runner pushing their limits, making tough calls, and celebrating those wins, all while learning to listen to their body. What's the takeaway for our listeners, even if they're not lacing up for a marathon anytime soon?
I think it's that reminder that nothing happens overnight, right? Even those things that seem impossible, like running a marathon or, whatever mountain you're trying to climb.
I like that.
It's about those small, consistent steps. Planning, listening to that inner voice, putting in the work. That's how you achieve those crazy dreams.
Love it. It's not about some superhuman thing. It's about strategy and showing up consistently.
Yeah.
Kind of like how you are.
Okay. Moving on.
All right. But seriously, this week got us thinking about tough choices, sacrificing the good for the great. So here's something to chew on. What's one thing you'd be willing to give up temporarily to reach that next level? It could be a small habit, a bit of your time, anything that might be holding you back. Think about it. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.